What's good, YouTube? This is RPU here, and I'm back again with another video. And guys, beware the Ides of March. Guys, we are 2 weeks away from the Federal Reserve March meeting, and inflation has been running hot, man. The Consumer Price Index inflation rate was 7.5% for the month of January, the highest it's been in over 40 years, up from 7% in the month of December. And now, if you thought things were getting expensive before, according to Fox Business, the Ukraine-Russia conflict could push inflation to 10% as the invasion begins. Escalating Russia-Ukraine crisis could push oil prices to $120 a barrel. Guys, the price of everything is about to go up. The price of gas and anything that has to be transported, it's about to go up again. It's about to get bad out here. I don't know how people are going to survive this. Inflation. U.S. inflation is already at the highest level in 4 decades. Russia's full-scale attack on Ukraine could push it even higher. That's because the conflict has already sent oil prices above $100 a barrel for the first time since 2014. With some prices jumping as high as $105 on Thursday after Russia launched a broad offensive against Ukraine late Wednesday night, hitting cities and bases with airstrikes and shelling. Brent crude, the global benchmark, surged more than 8%, hitting $105.50 early Thursday. U.S. oil prices, meanwhile, climbed to more than $99 a barrel. Guys, I think we're about to see $7 a gas, $8 a gallon gas. It's crazy. It's coming. The war in Europe, which has shattered nearly 3 decades of peace on the continent, could ultimately cause oil prices to surge as much as 20% to $120 a barrel, according to RSM chief economist Joe Bruzuelas. Should that happen, consumer prices in the U.S. would surge above 10% on an annual basis, the economist said, the highest since October 1981. The conflict also threatens to cause massive casualties. Smoke rises from a power plant after shelling outside the town of Shastia, near eastern Ukraine of Luhansk, on February 22, 2022. The potential for a broader energy shock to the global and U.S. economy should Russia invade Ukraine has added to a combustible mix of factors that is causing inflation to accelerate in the U.S. and abroad. Bruzuela said, that risk carries with it the potential to slow down growth. Russia is the world's second largest producer of both oil and natural gas, which Germany depends on. A conflict or sanctions could disrupt the oil market even further at a time when high demand is outpacing tight supplies. The organization, known as OPEC, have resisted calls to boost the supply. Isn't that crazy how we shut down our own pipelines, and then we go to OPEC and ask them to produce more oil? It just doesn't make sense to me. Germany already halted the certification for the Nord Stream 2 gas pipeline from Russia, while the U.S. and the European Union have also levied harsh financial sanctions against Moscow after it recognized 2 breakaway regions in eastern Ukraine. Russia has already said on multiple times they don't care about sanctions. Additional sanctions are expected, which they don't care about, after Russia launched a wide-ranging attack on Ukraine that threatens to upend the geopolitical order and reverberate throughout the rest of the world. The geopolitical order, the world order. You see that? Upend the world order. Russian President Vladimir Putin threatened that any foreign country attempting to interfere will be hit with quote-unquote consequences you have never seen, a chilling reference to Moscow's nuclear arsenal. American and European officials also fear that Russia may retaliate against the sanctions by cutting off the supply of oil and natural gas that flows from Moscow to Europe, sending prices spiraling higher. It's crazy. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky cut diplomatic ties with Russia and declared martial law. As of today, our countries are on different sides of world history, Zelensky tweeted. Russia has embarked on a path of evil, but Ukraine is defending itself and won't give up its freedom. Although the invasion sparked fresh jitters about the possibility of a new world war, the US and its NATO allies have so far shown no indication that they would join the war against Russia. But they're supplying weapons. Russian President Vladimir Putin speaks as he attends the G20 summit via video conference in Moscow, Russia on October 30th, 2021. JP Morgan Chase economists have warned that any disruption to Russia's supplies could easily send oil to $120 a barrel. The West is like shooting themselves in the foot here when it comes to oil. U.S. consumers are already facing sticker shock at the pump. A gallon of gas on average cost $3.51 nationwide on Tuesday, according to AAA, up from $2.63 a year ago. In California, gas prices are well over $4 a gallon. I just paid $4.85 for unleaded yesterday. $4.85. Man, $20 doesn't even get me half a tank anymore. For months, the prices of all kinds of energy, gasoline, diesel fuel, natural gas, oil, and more, have been a major driver behind inflation. They're not even talking about all the money that we just printed. All, the national deficit that we just ran up $2 trillion in 1 year. They're not talking about the fact that we're $30 trillion in debt. No. It's Russia. It's Russia's fault. Which surged 7.5% in January, the highest level since 1982. Energy costs have climbed 27% over the past year, in part due to lopsided supply and demand. Consumers are traveling more, but the supply side has not kept up with the demand. That's the end of the article. Guys, Russia may cause some inflation, but the United States has been printing money like crazy. Biden, didn't we just spend like $3 trillion on an infrastructure bill? $3 trillion that we didn't have? Right? And Biden is out here saying that he's fighting inflation. Fighting inflation is his top priority. Really? I watched a little bit of the State of the Union address. It was 2 hours long. I didn't finish the whole thing. I watched about an hour of it, and I couldn't watch it. I couldn't finish it because the lies were just off the charts. But let me say this though, I was actually surprised. At how well Biden spoke. Isn't that crazy? Because when you see him on TV, he's usually bumbling and stumbling and stuttering and all kind of stuff. But at his State of the Union address, he spoke pretty clear. But the shit that was coming out of his mouth was just bullshit. Let's talk about this. Timing is not in the president's favor as elections that could cost his party control of Congress approach, and inflation has yet to fade. Oh yeah, we're about to see a reckoning when the midterms come. President Biden used his State of the Union address to refocus the nation, distraction, on how far the economy has come since the pandemic recession. Man, let me talk about this State of the Union address for a second. First of all, he started the speech by saying that America has come together. He said that we were apart due to COVID, but now America has come back together. And he says we've never been more together than ever before. That's a lie. We've never been more divided than ever before. Come on, man. What a lie. And then I just don't understand how all the restrictions and all the mask mandates and everything is ending now. Everything is just ending all at once. Crazy, right? How is it that, I recently heard about another strain coming out of China and everything's ending. Indoor mandates are ending. He just tried to push these crazy tyrannical mandates all the way to the Supreme Court, failed, and now he's trying to divert attention away from all of this and talk about how good the economy is doing. The economy is in free fall. What are you talking about? Let me talk about this State of the Union address, because I was getting actually pissed off listening to this shit, right? So he started this speech off by talking about standing up to Putin, right? He was talking about how the Ukrainians are resilient people and they will stand up to Putin, right? Which they are. I give respect to the Ukrainian people for standing up to Putin. But President Biden was talking like Russia was defeated. He was talking like Russia was defeated and he was giving a victory speech. I couldn't understand it. He was like bragging about how we put sanctions on Russia. We made their Russian ruble collapse and we showed them, basically. But it's not over. The freaking war is not over. Russia is sending in a 40-mile convoy into Ukraine and they're freaking bombing them. I just seen on the news that Russia had recently dropped a bomb, on this building. And Biden is out here talking like it's over. But it's getting worse. I just couldn't understand it. It was like the Twilight Zone. it was crazy. And man, I just don't understand how he's going to fight inflation when you're printing trillions and trillions and trillions and trillions of dollars. But yeah, he's trying to refocus the nation. He's trying to divert your attention away from everything that has been happening for the past 2 years. And no, we need to keep our eyes open and we need to look at everything that's going on. He's doing the watch the left hand while you don't know what the right is doing. No. We're watching both hands. So President Biden used his State of the Union address to refocus the nation on how far the economy has come. On how far the economy has come since the pandemic recession. Oh yeah, we've come a long way, in the words of Biden. But he also highlighted his plans to help sow rapid price gains, underscoring the challenge Democrats face ahead of the midterm elections. Inflation is painfully high, voters are unhappy, and the tried and true way to cool price increases is by hurting growth and the labor market. This dude had the nerve to say that people are so depressed in the United States that they are unable to realize how good they're doing, how good the economy is doing. What? More deflection. That shit is crazy. I just don't understand. These people are delusional. Mr. Biden acknowledged the toll that inflation was taking on everyday Americans, saying, "My top priority is getting prices under control." Stop spending then. How about you stop spending? Stop spending. How you going to get prices under control if you don't stop spending money you don't have? How you going to do it? Too many families are struggling to keep up with the bills. Inflation is robbing them of the gains they thought otherwise they would be able to fill. I get it. Mr. Biden said, I get it. And he went on like this tangent. He went on like this tangent about how, like, back in the day, some shit, and he was like trying to like relate it to how like people are struggling now. Like, bruh, you're not struggling no more. You're worth millions of dollars, so you can never feel what we feel. The president outlined a rough plan for beating back rapid price increases, including encouraging corporate competition and strengthening a supply chain that has struggled to keep up with consumer demand. He said his administration will begin a quote-unquote crackdown on ocean shipping costs, which have soared during the pandemic. Why not open the ports back up? Let people go back to work. What are you talking about? What are you talking about? Open the supply chain back up if you want to crack down on ocean shipping costs. You just got these boats just sitting out here in the ocean, hundreds of them. I don't understand this shit. I don't understand it. But I was looking at this beating back. He should put that in his slogan too. Like, build back better, and then he could have beating back inflation. But it's only gonna get worse. My plan to fight inflation will lower your costs and lower the deficit. Get the fuck out of here. My plan to fight inflation will lower your costs and lower the deficit. Do you believe that shit? But White House policies have historically served as a backup line of defense when it comes to containing inflation, which is primarily the Federal Reserve's job, which they're not doing. The central bank is prepared to move swiftly in the coming months, weeks now, to raise interest rates, making money more expensive to borrow and spend. Higher rates are meant to slow hiring, wage growth, and demand enough to tamp down price increases. Is it possible that inflation could cool so much on its own this year that the Fed will be able to gently slow the economy towards a sustainable path? I don't know, because we just ran up a $2 trillion deficit last year. Where's all this money going? How are we spending all this money? So much people get Social Security and welfare and food stamps and Section 8. All these entitlement programs need to be reformed. It's causing us too much money. A lot of people have been living high on the government hog for a long time. A lot of welfare people, I don't have nothing against welfare people because I've been on welfare before, But you're living on the government tip, and it's causing huge deficits that we cannot afford. Our tax revenue is not keeping up with the debt. The debt is increasing exponentially. It's unsustainable. And the Fed, if it wants to fight inflation, has to move swiftly. It is possible that inflation could cool so much on its own this year that the Fed will be able to gently slow the economy towards a sustainable path. But if price gains remain rapid, the Fed's playbook for combating overheating is by inflicting economic pain. That's crazy. They're going to pop the bubble. They're going to contract the money supply. The cost of borrowing is going to go up. And then that is when we have the liquidity crisis. That is why inflation, which is running at the fastest pace in 40 years, is a major liability for the Biden administration. One that Biden could hardly avoid addressing Tuesday night. Bro, he didn't address a lot of things. He didn't even talk about the people that got left in Afghanistan, nor the 13 soldiers that got killed. None of that. Like, if somebody hadn't brought that up to me, like, I know this sounds bad, but I had recently forgot about that too, because so many things have been happening people are still stranded in Afghanistan. And if they ever make it back to the United States, their story needs to be heard because they got left. They got left. It is undermining consumer confidence by chipping away at paychecks and causing sticker shock for consumers trying to buy groceries, couches, or even used cars. And the cure could slow a solid economic rebound, just as Democrats are trying to make their pitch for re-election to voters. The biggest problem for President Biden is that there's no good ways to massage inflation, said Jason Furman, a Harvard economist and former White House economic official during the Obama administration. There's a lot that he can do about it, but he can't get up there and say, the only solution here is patience in the Federal Reserve. Yeah, people, the Federal Reserve is stalling. We need rates to rise now. But I don't think the economy will be able to sustain higher rates. We only made it to 2.5% last time we tried to raise interest rates in 2014. You know how much money has been printed since 2018? How much money has been borrowed since 2018? I don't even think we'll be able to get to 2%. Biden urged that his administration policies could help to cool down inflation at less of a cost to the economy by expanding its capacity to produce goods and services. What do we produce? What is he going to produce? One way to fight inflation is to drive down wages and make Americans poor. What? Make Americans poor. One way to fight inflation is to drive down wages and to make Americans poor, he said, referencing the way that central bank policies work. I think we have a better plan to fight inflation. Lower your costs and not your wages. I wonder how he's going to do that. Mr. Furman said that while the sort... Hold on, let me back up. If you have higher wages, everyone has higher wages. Everyone from the fast food worker to the janitor, everybody's getting a price increase. Then inflation is going to happen naturally because you have more money chasing the same amount of goods. If we're not producing anything here, then you have more money chasing the same amount of goods, which naturally causes inflation. Now, Mr. Furman said that while the sort of solutions the president laid out, ideas to improve supply chains, which they fucked up, and expand workforce opportunities, were the right things for the administration to do, the nation should not be under any illusion that it is going to add up to a lot in terms of cooling rapid price gains. It's not really going to do much, basically. It's not basically going to do much. This dude also said, he said he was going to release 30 million barrels of oil in reserves, and Nancy Pelosi was just up there clapping like a seal, right? You're releasing 30 million barrels of oil, which is not even going to do much. It's not even going to have much of an effect on the price of gas. You shut down the pipeline. You shut down the pipeline on day one in office. If you want to stop depending on foreign oil, then America must become energy independent. But they don't want to admit that, You cut off your own pipeline and then you go to ask OPEC for more oil. Does that make sense? Doesn't make sense to me. The president also tried to underline the economic wins of his presidency, which has seen the labor market strengthen markedly. Lies. The economy has added 6.6 million jobs. Lies. Fox News said that America has lost 3 million jobs. That's a lie. The economy did not add 6 million jobs back since Mr. Biden took office. unemployment is poised to fall below 4%, lies, and growth has been more rapid than in many other advanced economies. The strength and scope of the rebound has surprised economists and policymakers, who often credit relief packages rolled out under Trump and Biden administrations for fomenting such a quick recovery. Now look how they put Trump and Biden together here when it's something positive. When have you ever seen them lump Trump and Biden together in anything? You know, it's always when something happens, it's Trump's fault or Trump did it, you know? But this is the first time I've seen somebody lump Trump and Biden together because it's something positive. Even though these relief packages cost trillions of dollars that we didn't have, which is causing inflation. Fucking dumbass. But some economists warned last year that the $1.9 trillion legislation the administration ushered through Congress in March was too big and too poorly targeted. Where did the money go? And that it would stoke demand and help fuel rapid price gains. Duh. Like Gregory Mannarino says, duh. While fiscal policy was not the only reason inflation popped last year, it does seem to have contributed to high prices by encouraging more consumption. It may not be the only reason, but it is one of the biggest reasons. We just surpassed 30 trillion in national debt. That's not including unfunded liabilities and none of that. As flush consumers spent strongly in 2020 and last year, and as homebound shoppers bought more goods like easy chairs and computers, rather than services like manicures and meals out, supply chains struggled to keep up. Virus outbreaks continued to shut down factories. Ports became clogged, and there were not enough ships to go around. The perfect storm of strong buying and limited supply pushed car prices in particular sharply higher, left consumers waiting months on end for new dining room sets, and meant that fancy bicycles were harder to find and afford. And now, inflation has moved past just these goods affected by the pandemic. The cost of food, fuel, housing, vacations, and furniture are all rising rapidly. And as conflict in Russia threatens to push up gas prices in the coming months, the situation will likely to get worse before it gets better. That's not good. That's not good. It's going to get worse before it gets better. I don't think it's going to get better at all. You know? But we'll see. While the White House spent last year downplaying popping prices, arguing that they would fade with the pandemic, as roiled global supply chains righten themselves, nearly a full year of high inflation readings have proved too much to ignore. Climbing costs are eating away at paychecks and helping to drive Mr. Biden's poll numbers to the lowest point so far in his presidency. That's not the only reason why his poll numbers are in the toilet, but let's keep going. I don't think it is going to go away in a way that is going to save the incumbent party by November. It's over. It's over. Hopefully people are waking up, said Neil Dutta, an economist at Renaissance Macro Research. Even though the labor market is quite strong, it's not enough to keep pace with the shock people are feeling with respect to inflation. The Fed is expected to raise interest rates from near zero at its meeting this month, and officials have signaled that they will then make a series of increases throughout the year as they try to put a lid on inflation. The central bank sets policy independently of the White House, and the Biden administration avoids talking about monetary policy out of respect for that tradition. But the timing could be politically tricky. The Fed could prompt an economic pullback that coincides with this autumn's election season, creating a double whammy for the Democrats, in which central bank policy is slowing down job market progress even as inflation has yet to fully fade. Well, that would kind of be like coming full circle because, when Obama was in office, Janet Yellen kept interest rates at zero the whole time that Obama was in office. And now, Democrats are in office again, and the Fed is going to raise rates and crash the economy on them, which they don't want because they think that if they can keep the economy afloat until elections are over, and then they believe that they can have a chance in the elections. But I believe that the damage has already been done. That might be especially true if conflict in Ukraine sends fuel prices higher, further stoking inflation and making consumers expect rapid price increases to continue, some economists said. The Fed has to be more aggressive on inflation, said Diane Swank, the chief economist at Grant Thornton. It could bleed into the unemployment rate by the end of the year. Mr. Furman said that he thought it was more likely that the Fed's actions would not inflict too much pain this year, though they might begin to squeeze the job market in 2023. And Mr. Dutta speculated that the Russian invasion of Ukraine could slow the central bank down somewhat, at least in the near term. The Fed basically has a choice. They can sink the economy into a recession, or they can let inflation run a little bit, Mr. Dutta said. They're not going to risk a recession with the geopolitical situation we're in. So, yeah, I've been hearing that thanks to this conflict in Ukraine, that the Fed may not raise rates. They may not raise rates. We're definitely probably not going to get 7 rate hikes like they said, but this war may cause the Fed to not raise rates at all because in times of crisis, people may need to borrow more money, So inflation may run even more. The conflict overseas may also give Mr. Biden and Democrats a moment of patriotism to capitalize on. So far, Mr. Biden's sanctions have been well received by voters based on the results of an ABC Washington Post poll. I'm telling you guys, if you watch that State of the Union, he was literally like grandstanding, like, yeah, we showed Mr. Putin, yeah, we collapsed the ruble, yeah, the Ukrainians are standing up, but Russia is still bombing the shit out of them. And they said they don't give a shit about your sanctions. So what are you going to do? They're talking about, the European Union is talking about having a resolute vote on more sanctions. Russia has said they don't give a shit about your sanctions. They don't give a shit. And they're bombing them even harder. And they just took over a major city in Ukraine. So why are you over here giving victory speeches when the conflict is still going on? I don't understand this shit. I thought that was Joe Biden right there. At the same time, higher gas pump prices resulting from the conflict could further dent consumer confidence. Sentiment has swooned as price increases have climbed and tends to be very responsive to fuel costs. The price of a barrel of gas climbed above $100 on Tuesday, the highest since 2014, based on a popular benchmark. The question is whether in the face of rising costs, the administration will be able to turn bright spots. International cooperation and the pace of recent job gains lies into something salient for consumers and voters. The answer may hinge on what happens next. Annual price gains are expected to slow down in the coming months as they are measured against relatively high readings from last year, and as supply chain delays ease somewhat. They could moderate even more later this year if the current elevated goods prices come back down in the most hopeful scenario. If inflation moderates on its own and a relatively small response from the Fed is enough to nudge it down even further, the economy could be left with strong growth, a booming labor market, and a positive outlook headed into 2023. So, they're hoping for inflation to cool down on its own, and hopefully that, a minuscule rate hike will be enough to cool down inflation. I don't know. I don't think so. I think that they're overly optimistic when it comes to inflation right here. It says, but increasingly, inflation is expected to fade more slowly. Economists at Goldman Sachs think consumer price inflation could end 2022 at 4.6%, more than twice the level it hovered around before the pandemic. That would mark a slowdown. The measure now stands at 7.5%, but it would be much higher than what the Fed normally aims for. So they're hoping for inflation to decrease by the end of the year, but we'll see. We'll see. If we keep spending money like we are, I don't think inflation is going to go anywhere. But that would allow the administration to talk about a moderation in price gains, but it might not feel like a significant improvement to consumers as they head to the polls. Inflation is always political, but it burns, even in a good economy, Ms. Swank said. It creates a sensation of chasing a moving target, which no one likes. Wow. So, I guess the only reason that they want to get inflation down is so they can have something positive to talk about to make them look good around election time. It's crazy. But we'll see. We'll see if they can get it done. Let's go, Brandon. Now, this is from CNBC. It says, with inflation and Ukraine, Powell must thread a needle on Capitol Hill this week to calm markets. You mean spin a web? Fed Chairman Jerome Powell addresses separate House and Senate panels this week as part of biannual hearings on monetary policy. Fears over the Russian invasion of Ukraine have coincided with markets quietly dialing down their expectations for Fed action. So now the markets are not expecting the Fed to raise rates as much, which coincides with the last article. Powell will have to convince Congress the Fed is doing more to combat inflation at a time when the market thinks it will be doing less. The balancing act is going to be difficult, said Mark Zandi, chief economist at Moody's Analytics. Fed Chair Jerome Powell, he's out there like, I'm going to do it. I'm going to raise rates. I'm going to do it. He ain't did it yet. Federal Reserve Chairman Jerome Powell is tasked with telling Congress this week that the central bank will be doing more to control inflation at a time when markets expect it will be doing less. I'm going to do it. I'm going to raise it. I'm going to raise the rates. With fears over the Russian invasion of Ukraine causing turmoil in the financial world, Wall Street has quietly dialed down its expectations for Fed action. Where markets had been expecting the Fed to raise interest rates up to 7 times in 2022, recent pricing now indicates just 5 moves. That would be the equivalent of bringing the Fed's benchmark short-term borrowing rate up to 125 basis points, or a range between 1.25% and 1.5%. The shifting winds mean Powell has a tightrope to walk, as he explains during 2 days of congressional testimony that his institution is committed to taming inflation while also being mindful of the geopolitical turmoil. He has to thread a pretty thin needle. The balancing act is going to be difficult, said Mark Zandi, chief economist at Moody's Analytics. My sense is he leads with the uncertainty that this is all creates, given that the Russian invasion could take many different paths, each one darker than the other. He'll reinforce the point that in a period of such heightened uncertainty, it might make sense for the Fed to be a little more cautious in enacting policy. So they're not going to do much. Just keep the status quo, continue to print, money printer go burr. Up until a week or so ago, markets have been expecting the policy-making Federal Open Market Committee to approve 25 basis point hikes at each of its remaining 7 meetings this year. There even was a strong lean to the first move at the March 15-16 meeting being 50 basis points. Russia's attack has taken that off the table, at least for now. So expect inflation to go up. Play it by ear would be his best message, said Peter Bakvar, Chief Investment Officer at Bleakley Advisory Group. That would allow him to sort of skate around the very difficult position that he's currently in. We're going to deal with inflation, but is let's see how the economy goes from here. Economists largely expect growth to be solid this year, if a bit less than in 2021, which was the strongest since 1984. Fed officials in December projected a GDP to accelerate at a 4% pace in 2022. However, unrelenting inflation at its fastest level in 40 years, along with the prospects that the Russia-Ukraine situation could add to inflation and further complicate supply chains, put another wrinkle in the Fed policy outlook. I don't think they're going to raise rates. If they don't raise rates, to me, that will signal that we're on our way to higher inflation. They're just going to let it run. And since they're already talking about letting it run, Market Watch says Russia-Ukraine puts 10% US CPI on radar as BlackRock repeats central banks may have to live with inflation. So if central banks have to live with inflation, that means that we're going to have to live with inflation as well. So you might want to prepare. Stock up on the things you need now before they get more expensive. Now, according to Reuters, this analysis says that the Ukraine war won't deter the Fed and company from March rate hikes. But we just read in this article, that the war puts another wrinkle in the Fed's policy outlook. So we don't know. One person is thinking one thing, one person is thinking another thing. But we know that, if the United States gets involved in a war, they're going to need to borrow more money to fund that war, which we already don't have, which will cause even more inflation. You see what's happening? It's crazy. 7 hikes, fast rising wages could cause the Fed to raise interest rates even higher this year. Bruh. I seen a Del Taco hiring for $16 to $21 an hour. What the hell? I work in healthcare, and people in fast food are making almost the same amount of money as I do. That's inflation for you. New York Times says Powell says rates are headed higher, even as Ukraine poses uncertainty. Joe Powell, the Federal Reserve Chair, said he would support a 1/4 point increase at the March meeting. So we might get a 0.25% increase, So we'll go from what? We'll go increase from to like 0.25% to 0.50%. We're already at 0 to 0.25, so a 0.25%, will that be enough to curb inflation though? I doubt it. Reuters also says Fed hopes economy is on cusp of inflation slowdown as rate hikes loom. hopes the economy is on an inflation slowdown. We're just hoping. We're just hoping and praying that the economy and the inflation will slow down on its own, so we don't have to raise rates and cause an economic collapse. But that sounds like wishful thinking to me. I'm just reading the headlines, Opinion from Market Watch. To stop inflation, the Fed should go big, starting with a 100 basis point hike in March. A full 1%. A full 1% hike. It would definitely shock the markets, because they would be only expecting like a 0.25%, 25 basis points. 100 basis point hike would shock the markets. I don't know if that would crash them, but it would definitely shock them. If the Fed wants to retain any credibility, any credibility at all, it must abandon its gradualist mindset and get the federal funds rate to 3.5% as soon as possible. They're not going to be able to do it though. We couldn't even get to 2.5. We couldn't get to 2.5 in 2018. You really think we're going to get to 3.5? I think the economy will probably, I think the Fed fund rate will probably get up to 2%. And then the markets will just puke. Plunge, like Gregory Mannarino says. Fed Powell backs quarter point March rate hike, open to bigger moves later. So, looks like we're gonna be getting a hike. It's not gonna be that much, it's gonna be minuscule. But he says he's open to bigger moves later. He's not committed to bigger moves later. He's open. But as this conflict in Ukraine progresses, his stance could potentially change. You see what I'm saying? And so he could raise the Fed funds rate a quarter point. And if things got worse over in Europe, he could, keep rates at that level. He could also cut them back down and continue to print more money, and cause even more inflation. We're in a catch-22 here, you guys. Inflation is running wild. Your purchasing power is being eroded. And people all over the world are trying to flee to safe haven assets. And it's definitely not transitory. But like they said, it's going to get worse before it gets better. A whole lot worse. And if you thought rent was expensive before, you ain't seen nothing yet. But let me know what you think about all this. This is RPU, and I'll see you in the next video. Peace.